Jason Kander answered the charge at a time where he had just lost a very close election in Missouri, lost by about 3 points in a state that Hillary lost overwhelmingly, dramatically outperformed the national ticket. He hadn't given a public speech since that election, but decided to come to Arena to give his first speech after the election, talking about what he learned and how we can win in states where we've lost ground over the past few years and decades. But since then, he has taken on an even bigger challenge now across the country. He is the epitome of what Lacey Dawson yesterday talked about in terms of being a gapper, bridging the gap between what ought to be and what is. And he's now taken on voting rights. Before, as Secretary of State of Missouri, he fought for voting rights. But now with Let America Vote, he's going around the country fighting against disenfranchisement all over the place. And so it's my pleasure to invite Jason up here to talk about the work that he's doing, and then we're going to invite one of our local celebrities and leaders, Jocelyn Benson, to come up and have a discussion about voting rights and secretaries of state. Thank you, Jason.
That's my usual walk-up music. It's so cool that you guys had it. That's awesome. I didn't know. Thought maybe it would be like, play that funky music, white boy. It's always terrible when that happens. No, thank you all so much for having me, Ravi. Thank you. This is like pretty cool. This is legit now. Like I just can't. I mean, it was legit before, but like they have like I just got here. They have like little staff badges. This is some serious stuff going on at Arena. I'm impressed. How many? Raise your hand if you were there in. Was it Nashville? Was the first one? Okay, cool. Well, awesome. You're in luck. I didn't ask because I was like going to give the same speech. Don't worry, I'm not. I asked because I was thinking as we were running in here to be here on time, I was thinking about how different just everything feels right now than it felt then. Somebody I think almost applauded. That's okay. I'm not like gonna go Jeb Bush on you and say like, please clap. But like, I'm excited about how different things are right now. Do you remember how right before, and I'm gonna talk about Let America Vote in just a second, but do you remember how right before the election, everybody would say, even people who were really pleased with how they thought things were going to go, whatever, everybody would say, God, I can't wait till we're not talking about politics anymore. Do you remember that? Everybody was like, I can't wait till I turn on my TV and it's not politics. Have you heard anybody say that? No, me either. When we were together in Nashville, you remember how we all felt? Like, my son, who's almost 4, he does this thing where when he really wants attention, he's like, oh, I'm sad. And he like kind of just, and he's not really sad. He just, wants you to, oh, buddy, why are you sad? But we really were, right? Like everybody was like, oh, their arms hanging. And then what happened? This sort of thing, and honestly, the Women's March. Like that, I mean, that's what happened. Like, that is. So sometimes, I just think sometimes it's helpful to step back and look at where things are and where things were. And just remember that sort of just changed so much when everybody said, oh, you know what? I think we can fight back against this. And I think what's happened is we all recognize that while Donald Trump might have won the election, he didn't win the argument about who America is or where America's going. Like, we actually won that argument. And we're still winning that argument. So with that said, let me tell you what I'm doing. So after the election, when I heard at the time President-elect Trump say that 3 to 5 million folks voted illegally in the election, which he maintains that lie. I argue, by the way, that is the biggest lie that a sitting president has ever told. I don't know what number 2, 3, and 4 are, but I know who told them. All right, but I think that one's the biggest. May get beat soon. I don't know, but when he said that, I think a lot of people, maybe a lot of people in this room, exclusively heard, and this is understandable, just a deeply insecure human being, coming up with a lie that he could tell himself and the country about why he lost the popular vote. That's probably also right. okay? But there's more to it than that. The reason that Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and a whole bunch of other folks in the Republican Party didn't immediately say, okay, that's a lie, that's not true, is because it's very helpful to the cause that they've had politically over the last 15 years or so. And I say politically, this is not a policy difference between the parties, okay? It's not. It is a political strategy by the Republicans over about the last 15 years to make it harder for folks who are really unlikely to vote Republican to vote. It is. It's just a political strategy. And it shouldn't be in a policy box. It should be kept over here in the box where you think about where they run TV ads or which doors they knock on or messaging, that kind of thing. That's what it is. It's purely political strategy. And so when he said that, it was very helpful to them in getting it out into the ether, the idea that there's something fundamentally wrong in the logistics of American democracy, and therefore you need to clamp down and you need to make it harder to vote. That's what they're trying to do. So I was the Secretary of State of Missouri for 4 years. I was the chief election official of the state. Supermajority Republican legislature. I've seen up close the voter suppression playbook. There's really 3 major steps to the voter suppression playbook. Step 1 is you convince people that democracy is not working. You convince people that there's widespread fraud. Never mind the fact that statistically you are more likely as an American to be struck by lightning than you are to commit voter impersonation fraud. That's not relevant to them because it's not a policy difference. They just need to make people believe that. That's step number 1. Step 2, you create obstacles to voting. Step 3, you create obstacles to the obstacles. That's it. That's the voter suppression playbook. So I knew that that's what was happening. And then when you combine that with the fact that most of the voting rights victories that we've had over the last 15 years or so while they've been doing this have been in court, and rightfully so. And the people who have brought those cases and made those arguments have done tremendous work, and it's still incredibly important. But what I realized with Jeff Sessions making the Department of Justice switch sides in court, like picking up the papers at one council table and moving over to the other, because now they're for voter suppression and not for voters, combined with the fact that President Trump gets to pick the judges, it suddenly becomes very urgent that for the first time, that argument that we were having in the court of law has to now expand into the court of public opinion. So for the first time, we really urgently have to start winning this political argument. And the first part of that is we have to actually start waging it. So that's what we did. So in February, we created Let America Vote. Advisory board is great. It's everybody from Martin Luther King III to Jon Favreau, not the movie guy, the speech guy. I do that to John a lot. Anyway, to, Cecile Richards, Stephanie Shriak, and Bradley Whitford from the West Wing. So it's a very national project, and the whole idea in what we're doing is to create political consequences for folks who make it harder to vote. That's it. It's real simple. And I'll give you one example, and then we'll move to this conversation we're going to have. But y'all are probably following the election in the 6th District in Georgia a little bit, John Ossoff. I was down there campaigning with him recently. Before that, Let America Vote looked at that race and noticed that all this money's being spent on messaging, but the thing that nobody was really looking at was that the election officials there were closing down early voting locations, particularly in parts of the district where that fits in with the strategy, right? Parts of the district where folks were a lot less likely to vote Republican. So we put an effort together on the ground. We put a lot of pressure on the Secretary of State who wants to run for governor, a Republican. We put pressure on the local election board, had people call in, ran some radio ads. They caved. This is just one example of what we've done. They reopened an early voting location. That turned out to be, in the primary, the biggest turnout early voting location in the district. Or one of the biggest. And so that's just one example of when you create political consequences for people doing something that they shouldn't be doing, it affects their actions. So that's what we're doing. And then one last thing before we start the conversation, this energy that you feel like in this room and around the country, it's quite real. And I just wanted you to know that. I've been getting around the country a bit. I've had a lot of invitations. I'm going to be in Phoenix tonight. And woke up in Kansas City, so I get 3 time zones today. But I'll just tell you a quick story. I was in Tennessee recently to speak to the Tennessee Democrats. We did a bunch of events, and this really nice woman named Dawn picked me up, and she drove me around all day to different events. And I had the impression, I just thought she knew everybody. Dawn must be the ace #1 longtime MVP volunteer of the Tennessee Democratic Party. So that night she's dropping me off at the airport. I'm going to go back to Kansas City. And I asked Dawn, how many years have you been volunteering with the party here? And Dawn says, years? She's like, I've been volunteering since January 20th, 2017. And she said, and I have done something that you would consider activism every single day since. And I hear a story like that everywhere I go. So, you know, they have the power, but we have the momentum, and I'm pretty excited about it. So, thank you. And now, I've never introduced anyone who's going to interview me before, so this is cool. So I'm going to introduce Jocelyn. Jocelyn is super impressive, so much so that of all the things that were written down for me, it doesn't even include that you went to Harvard Law, right? Like, so she's like pretty impressive. That was my safety. I didn't go. No. No, I didn't even apply. Like, let's be honest. Because, wasn't going to happen. But anyway, first thing, so she was just appointed to the Michigan State Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. And I would say applaud for each one, but there's a lot of stuff. So let's just, because she's like accomplished. She is the CEO of RISE, which is the Ross Initiative for Sports Equality. She spent 4 years as the dean of Wayne State Law School. She was appointed the dean at 36. I'm 36, so I think that's super young. She was the youngest woman in U.S. history to lead a top 100 law school. You can applaud for that one. I think that's good. Yeah. She's the author of Secretaries of State, Guardians of the Democratic Process. She was the 2010 Democratic candidate for Michigan Secretary of State here. She is the founder of the nonpartisan Michigan Center. I don't know. You say that when you get up here. Election law. It's on the back. Yes, there it is. It kept going. And she's on the board of directors of the Southern Poverty Law Center. We've met a few times before. I think she's great. Bring her up here with me. She has to get a mic because I think she's going to beatbox for us. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the plan.
Maybe if we really ask her. No, I'm just kidding.
Hi, everybody. Jason, great to have you here in Michigan, in Detroit. We've been, all of us here, I know, have been big fans of everything you've been doing. And particularly with now Let America Vote. I'm really excited because as someone who's also really devoted my whole career to amplifying people's voices in the political process, this is a really incredible moment where we have an opportunity to get to this goal of full turnout, full engagement, particularly of young people and people of color. So thank you for everything you're doing to lead the way. And I know part of what your mission is at Let America Vote is to really capture the political narrative of voting rights and engagement in a healthy democracy. And it's been frustrating for me and others over the years because we see oftentimes that narrative taken by the other side. We talk about voter fraud, we talk about voter ID and being used to really advocate for laws that will suppress the vote. So I'm curious for how we can take that political narrative back and win with momentum for voting rights.
Yeah, I get that question a lot. Sort of like, well, how do we beat them on this argument? So the first part of it is we have to make the argument. Right? So a lot of times people are like, oh, but we've been losing on this argument for so long. And I'm like, well, how many arguments do you win that you don't make, right? So that's the first part. One example for it is Obamacare, right? Like, I just saw a poll this morning where the Trump care is at 17%, and I think the last time I looked, Obamacare is at like 55, 60%, right? And there are a lot of factors, but one of the factors is that for a really long time, everybody was like, well, I don't know if I want to embrace that, I'm not sure. And then when, you know, I have a friend who has a saying, he says, courage is the lack of options. And so when you think about it, we got to a point where everyone in the party was like, well, we don't really have a choice. We probably better embrace this or it's going to go away. And then everybody started making the argument for it, right? An honest, very passionate argument. And now it's like close to twice as popular as the president, the current president. So, which I guess is not the best way to mark that because he's like pretty unpopular. So it's 55% is a good number, is my point. So when you make an argument, you're more likely to win it, and that's the first part. The second part is the other thing I compare this to is the flag burning amendment debate that used to be a very common debate, and if you would ask people, even back when you would poll that and you'd say, do you think it should be against the law to burn the flag? Probably 80% of people would say yes. But then if you asked them to rank it in like their top 20 issues, like it wasn't going to break the top 20. It's not going to help their kid get into college. It's not going to put food on their table. Not going to raise their wages. And so if you add to that, what if putting that amendment against burning the flag in the U.S. Constitution was also going to cost everybody money? It'd probably be way lower than 80%. Well, that's photo ID, for instance. That's a lot of these voter suppression laws. It is not something, people have their opinion, when you just ask just a basic, what do you think about this? But then, if you would ask them to rank it, it's not a high intensity level thing. They don't, because they know that fraud is not some widespread problem. And then the second part of it is that to institute those sort of things, it costs a ton of money. So you probably got to raise people's taxes. And so a lot of it is just a practical argument. And then the other part that we do is we make sure people understand that it is quite partisan what they're doing, right? Because Republican elected officials like this, because it makes it easier for them to win, Republican voters, the average Republican voter or independent voter, they look at something like this and they go, wait a minute, so you want to change the rules so that one party is more likely to win? They don't care necessarily that it's their party. They're just like, that doesn't seem right. I don't want you to do that to the system. And so accurately putting it in that box of partisan politics makes a big difference too.
Yeah. And I know also, one of the ways we met early on when you first became Secretary of State was at a conference on Secretaries of State and opportunities for clerks and other election officials to really champion administrative decisions as well as laws that will open up the voting process. And with so many people here thinking about running for office, can you talk a little bit about how important those offices are and how you can, as a local election official, as a clerk at the county or city level, or as a Secretary of State, through your own experience, you've seen it, how can you really have an impact in moving the ball forward in increasing opportunities to vote?
It's probably the best place to move the ball forward. One of the story I told was really about doing something to affect the actions of some very local officials, right? And this is what the other side has done over the last decade plus, particularly the Koch brothers, right? They looked at it and they said, hey, it's not just about a farm team for them, it's about controlling the machinery of government. The difference is we want to control the machinery of government to make it fair for everybody. I don't want to disappoint anybody. That's not what they're doing it for, right? Like, I hope everybody was sitting, I'm glad you're sitting down like that. But so that's incredibly important. County clerks, recorders in some states are in charge of elections, but all sorts of different offices. It's also where you're in the best position to make the argument to the folks that are there local, because you really get to know. Like when I was a state representative, I got to really know my constituents in a real way and could have real conversations with them.
And on the other hand, you've got Katherine Harris, who we remember in the 2000 election changed the outcome of a presidential election by refusing to do a recount. Ken Blackwell in Ohio, not putting enough polling places in certain areas in 2004, leading to 8-hour wait times in Cleveland. Then we have, of course, Chris Kobach today and many others. So if we're in a state where you have a Secretary of State who is on the other side of these issues.
Like, I don't know, Michigan? Is that one?
There are many, as you know. What are the options for folks in the audience who are in a state where a Secretary of State is not championing democracy?
Two things. One is the obvious one: beat them in an election. Look, that's elections have consequences. I mean, that's what's happening in the country right now. I mean, a lot of the time people ask me, like, what can I do right now? And I'm like, pick a date on the calendar, preferably an election day, and figure out who you're going to help, because that's what makes a difference. And then number two, you can get involved with Let America Vote. We're putting a lot of pressure on secretaries of state that do the wrong thing. Anybody involved with elections, state legislators. I mean, in Virginia, we're getting really involved. They have a bill that the governor vetoed, but they're trying to get enough of a supermajority where they can overrule it. This bill, there's a bunch to choose from, but this is my favorite. It's one that makes it where if you're going to vote absentee, you have to send in a photocopy of your driver's license with your ballot, right? Because, blue-collar folks and all the rest of us just have Xerox machines at home. I mean, it's no big deal. Obviously, we don't. That's why they're doing it, right? And so we're going to put a whole bunch of people on the ground in Virginia this summer to make sure that they're not successful in doing that and that they still have a governor who would veto a bill like that. So create political consequences. Make sure people know about it. When you think about the other issues out there, when somebody in a swing state or a swing district and they're a Republican and they're thinking about how they're going to vote on a labor issue or on a choice issue, they know that there's going to be a political force that works against them if they vote against that political force on that issue. And no matter what they say, it probably affects the decision that they make. Well, there's no interest group called Big Voter. It doesn't exist, right? So they are going to continue to operate in an environment that assumes there is no political consequence until we create one. So you can do that. You can go to letamericavote.org. We've been around over 3 months, just a little over 3 months, and 55,000 folks nationwide have gone and signed up to volunteer.
That's great.
Be one of them.
Great work. So I know one of the other challenges has been is we all have different issues that really drive us, whether it's advocating for economic equity, advocating for justice, criminal justice reform, healthcare access, education access. So how do you get those of us who have an energy for one of those other issues to really connect or focus on the voting rights issues as a baseline for addressing everything else?
You know, one of the coolest things about this actually has been that has not been a challenge. I don't think I've had to at any point try and convince anybody, on the progressive side that this is important, which is great. I mean, actually, when we launched, I remember wondering exactly that. I was thinking, are people going to, look, I was a chief election official. Like, I can nerd out on this, talk to you about all sorts of automatic voter registration, all that sort of stuff. But I didn't know whether or not other people were gonna understand why this was so important, or at least feel it the way I did. So the day we launched in February, we did a press release. I tweeted about it. We have a big email list. We didn't send an email. We didn't send a solicitation. Sent out a press release. That was it. By the end of that day, all we had was a splash page that frankly wasn't that easy to navigate and that easy to donate on. By the end of that day, thousands of people had read the articles, found the page. We had raised $110,000 online by the end of the day. People just got it. And now, completely separate from the work I'm doing with Let America Vote, the DNC created the Commission to Protect American Democracy from the Trump administration, which I think is aptly named, and asked me to chair it. And which I'm happy to do. There is a real recognition that you can argue about the issues all you want, but if every eligible voter is not allowed to vote, then they're trying to basically preordain the outcome. And I think everybody gets that, which is really exciting.
And as you're now 3 months into Let America Vote, you've got this incredible who's who of people behind it, from Martin Luther King to as you said, I mean, leaders all around the country, and you're also chairing this commission with the DNC, with Senator Booker and Secretary of State Grimes and other people from around the country. So as you engage in all these efforts, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what does success look like? What does democracy look like if Let America Vote and this commission has achieved its success?
To me, and it's not just us, there's a whole bunch of other great groups that are in this space, and obviously predate us. To me, it's just when we don't have to talk about access to voting anymore, right? I mean, like, we live in a day and age where Americans understandably have a certain degree of what I would refer to as a customer expectation when it comes to their daily interactions, right? Like, how many of you in the last week have done some sort of transaction online, right? And keep your hands up if it was on your phone. Okay, all right, cool. So put your hands down. So like right now, I can get out my phone and I could tell it that I want to make sure that when I get home tomorrow night, I could watch tonight's Royals game on my TV, right? I could do that. Now, I'm not saying that you should be able to vote that way, but I'm saying that does create a certain level of expectation. So that's why when folks look at, okay, I got to go wait in line for 2.5 hours to vote, and we still have elections on a Tuesday because that was the day before market day, I mean, that's why. I don't know if you know that, so when you look at all of that, and Let America Vote, I should be clear, is not, like, what our objective is, at least now, is to work on the defensive side in the sense of we are trying to stop bad things from happening. but there are a lot of groups on the offense. And so my hope is that just us and everybody else in this space can get to the point where, look, I believe election administration is about three things. It's about making sure only eligible voters vote. It's also about making sure every eligible voter has the opportunity to vote. And finally, and I guess, number 2 and 3 are the controversial points to the Republicans. Number 3 is making sure people meet as much convenience as possible at the polls. Like, we're going to make better decisions as a country when more people are in on the decisions. And so that to me is success.
So I would not be doing my job as your interviewer if I didn't ask the question that is, I'm sure, on almost many people's minds here. And we'll just say it more broadly. What's next for you? We're really excited that you're doing Let America Vote. I love it. I think it's I think it's a game changer. I think the leadership you've brought to this issue is fantastic. What's next?
Thanks.
You're welcome.
No, look, it's flattering, obviously, that people ask. We live in a time where Donald Trump's the president of the United States and the Republicans control Congress. So I think we live in a time where everybody who has a problem with that, which it turned out was 54% of voters, should grab an oar, and that's what I'm doing. Just grab an oar and do everything you can. And so, look, I'm trying to make sure we still hold elections in this country. And if I'm successful in that, maybe one day I'll be in one. So.
Yeah. After November, I actually looked just to check. The president can't cancel elections. So we've got that.
We have this on video, right?
Yeah.
Good. I hope we never need that.
Well, thank you, Jason, for coming to Michigan and inspiring us again. And all of you, Please get involved in Let America Vote. It's doing incredible stuff around the country. And at the end of the day, as we saw this past November, and as we're reminded in every election, who votes makes all the decisions in who governs. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you all.
And we'll see you. Thanks. Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, absolutely.
Beans don't burn on the grill. Just to get up that hill.